Hey y'all, let me start this video with a disclaimer on what it is not intended to be. You should not interpret anything that I'm about to tell you as this is the only way to play Hunt Showdown. Look, there's many different play styles. I can't possibly account for everyone's different preferences, but I can try to outline a general framework and how I approach making loadouts in Hunt Showdown, and hopefully it'll help you get up that learning curve just a little bit faster. And just a reminder, like for all of my Hunt for Beginners videos, remember that Crytek does patch and change things occasionally. So there are times where I might say something that might get changed or patched out later. Okay. And one final thought I will share before we get into it. If you find a loadout that really speaks to you, that you're really enjoying and you're really liking, stick with it for a while. There are so many things to learn in this game that, hey, if not putting any thought towards the loadouts helps you learn a little faster, roll with it. Roll with that. Okay, with that, let's get started. Okay, so some general advice. So when you're building your loadout, you want to think about what do you want to do with this? Do you want to push? Do you want to stay back and cover while your teammates push? How is your loadout going to perform in a one-on-one? How is your loadout going to perform when you're outnumbered? These are things that you may not know the answer to when you first start playing Hunt. But these are things that as you learn and as you develop and as you get more experience that you're going to want to keep in mind as you go, okay? So anyway, and then one other thing I will point out, if you want to know like, oh, I picked up this weapon off of this hunter, I don't know what unlocks it. So under the library tab, the library tab and the library sub-tab. If this is confusing, by the way, I totally understand. And by the way, keep in mind, Crytek, at the time that I've announced this, at the time that I've released this video, Crytek has announced that they're going to be revisiting the UI. So this could change a little bit, but as far as appearance goes, but as far as functionality, it should be pretty similar. You can go to the weapons book and see all the different trees and what unlocks what from there. Okay, so let's talk about tools for a minute. And by tools, I mean these slots right here. Okay, so in the first slot, I really recommend sticking with a melee tool. And for most beginners, I recommend you stick with the basic knife. There is one exception. Well, a couple exceptions. If you end up taking a bayoneted weapon, a weapon with a blade on it on the end of it, whether it be like a Romero hatchet or a Vetterli bayonet or a Martini Henry riposte, for example, there are more. Maybe you want to consider taking the dusters. Also, if you end up doing something like taking a Nagant Precision and a Romero hand cannon, or instead of Romero hand cannon, maybe like dual conversions or something to that effect, maybe consider taking the dusters in that first tool slot. But again, for the most part, the regular knife is a solid choice for your first slot. For your second slot, my personal recommendation is a med kit. No matter what slot you put this in, you should be running a med kit, especially when you first start. Now, I'm not saying you can't find success without a med kit, but I am saying you will find a whole lot of difficulty if you don't. Okay? So, if you want that challenge, feel free to not take a med kit. Otherwise, put a med kit in your tool slot. Okay? For your third slot, there's a couple of different things you can do. I recommend for beginners, look, if you take a silenced weapon like I have here in this loadout, you don't necessarily need it. Maybe you're better off with some fusees or a flare gun. But if you're not taking any silenced weapons, throwing knives are very useful. Why? Because you can take out a lot of grunts fairly quietly. You can take out things like concertina armors without too much drama. You can take out dog kennels, chicken coops. There's a lot of things that you can get done with throwing knives, and that would be my recommendation for slot number 3. For slot number 4, I recommend choke bombs. The only time I would not recommend taking choke bombs is if you aren't running in a team. If I'm running duos or trios, I'm taking choke bombs. They're $25 for 2 of them, You can get value out of them offensively as well as defensively. They are a solid choice, but I will say this. If you are running solo, maybe you consider taking something like concertina traps in that spot. But again, if you're in any sort of teams whatsoever, to take a choke bomb. If someone tries to burn your teammate, you can put them out. If someone keeps peeking a window in a building and you want them to stop because they're getting hits, choke it out. You can do that too. Choke bombs are very, very, very high on the utility factor. Don't hesitate to take them. And again, they're $25 for 2 of them. Super cheap. Try them out. So let's talk about consumables. So there are a lot of different options here, and this is one. This especially, in my opinion, is where you're definitely going to have to figure out what suits your play style better. Okay, but for beginners, these are my recommendations. So for your first 2 slots, I recommend you take 2 drugs. What do I mean by that? So you can take 2 full vitality shots, for example. That especially works well if you're going to hang back and try to do some cover work. That way, if you get tagged with a couple of long ammo hits, you've got some options to quickly recover health, get back in the fight, for example. But if you're not, well, let's say you're running a hand crossbow with half regular, half poison. Take a full vitality shot, in other words, and take a antidote shot, whether it be a weak or a full. If you are grouping with people who like to play super aggro, you can take a full vitality shot as well as a full stamina shot. In my opinion, I think that's the best way to fill out your first 2 slots. Take 2 drugs. Again, you can take 2 full vitality shots. There's nothing wrong with that. For your 3rd slot, I recommend taking something that goes boom. Frag grenade is probably your best choice there. Take something that explodes. Why? Because sometimes people will turtle up. Sometimes you need to create space to move into a building. Nothing creates space better than a consumable that explodes and does a lot of damage or kills someone. For your 4th slot, I recommend something that burns. So, can you take a Hellfire? Sure you can. And Hellfire is maybe your best choice, but don't sleep on the regular firebomb. The regular firebomb burns for 2 minutes, which means if you kill someone and you want to try to lock them down, you can burn them for 2 minutes for starters. And again, you can use them for zoning tools as well. If you're getting pushed really hard, let's just say you're running a long ammo rifle or you're running like a Springfield or something like that, and you know there's a team with shotguns that's approaching and you want to cut them off, throw a firebomb down. Let them take the chance in running through fire to approach you. The firebomb is a very utilitarian choice. You can get a lot of things done with it, and by the way, it's cheap. But again, when you first start, that's my recommendation. 2 drugs, something that goes boom, and something that burns. Okay, so with the tool conversation and the consumables conversation out of the way, let's talk about the guns. The first set of guns that I recommend for any new hunt player would be the Winfield C and the Silenced Nagant. Why? So the Silenced Nagant is excellent at clearing AI, and by the way, it's not exactly a slouch at PvP either. The Winfield C, don't let, again, I can't emphasize enough. I think I've talked about this in some of my previous beginners videos. Don't let the fact that the guns are available level 1 take you down a direction where you think that somehow means that they're bad. They are still useful. You can still get a lot of things done with it. The Winfield C, for example, the gun that I'm recommending right here, I believe has the least amount of sway out of any gun in the game. What's sway? When you aim down sights or aim in general, you'll notice that the screen does not hold completely still. It drifts. The Winfield C, I believe, is the least amount in the game. I'm not 100% sure on that. Anyway, once you learn the Winfield, and once you learn to hear the different guns, so you'll hear when someone has a shotgun, when someone's firing an uppercut, for example, or when someone's firing a long ammo gun. What do I mean by that? So look, The Winfield is sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. If you know what your opponents are playing, then that informs how you need to play the Winfield. Are your opponents playing long ammo? Well, then you probably need to try to work your way up to close the distance to try to take away that advantage. If they have close range weapons, you might want to reconsider getting close, maybe keeping their distance a little bit. And again, the Winfield is very good at adapting. One thing I will mention, keep in mind, compact ammo, all ammo loses damage over distance. So if you end up getting into a fight at range, just understand that if you're hitting them in the torso or any other part of the body, you might be doing very, very reduced damage. What do I mean by that? If you're inside a compound and you're shooting at someone who's well outside of it, well at distance, the Winfield is kind of a headshot or go-home weapon. You could end up getting multiple hits and not doing much damage at all, so keep that in mind. It's a very solid weapon. I run it very often, especially on console. Quite frankly, it's one of those guns to where you really, I think, you learn to adapt to the guns your opponents are playing, and I think that goes a long way to you growing as a player in Hunt. How does this loadout evolve? Well, you might consider trading out the Winfield with a Vetterli. I'll touch on this later. The first loadout that I ever played, that I ever mained, let's say that. The first loadout that I ever mained was a Vetterli and a Silenced Nagant. And the theory behind this loadout does not change. You have the ability to put a lot of shots down range with the Vetterli. It reloads very quickly, and the Vetterli has medium ammo, so it doesn't suffer as much of the damage drop-off as the Winfield does. And you have the utility of the Silenced Nagant. The Silenced Nagant, quite frankly, you can fit that into almost any loadout, really. It's a very, very useful AI tool. If you want to just straight up upgrade the Winfield, because you're like, well, wait, I have this Winfield C, and I also have this other Winfield tree, and this other Winfield tree is completely separate from the Winfield C tree. I will say that I think the most widely accepted best Winfield variant, and there are a lot of them, is the Winfield Swift. And keep the Silenced Nagant, that is perfectly fine. You can also choose to use something like a hand crossbow, which then gives you some utility. You can choose, for example, half regular hand crossbow bolts and half poison bolts. You can also choose to take something like a saber. I ran a full Winfield Swift saber for quite a long time. The saber is a bit of a madman tool, and if you choose it, don't take a knife as your primary tool slot. Okay, maybe take a Derringer. So again, Winfield Swift, solid choice. Vetterli, solid choice. For your secondary, I would recommend sticking with a Silenced Nagant, hand crossbow, or the saber, depending on your flavor. The last path, I will call medium range. This path we're going to call short range. We're going to start with the Romero and the Pax. Obviously, Romero unlocks at level 1. Let's talk about shotguns, okay? So, generally speaking, and I'm really talking in general terms here. When it comes to shotguns, you'll find some divided camps. You will find a lot of people who really, really prefer the Romero and the Spectre, and you will find some other people who really, really prefer the Rival and the Terminus. But Nick, you say, there's a Slate and a Crown and King. We're going to get there. The Romero is the first shotgun. Again, similar to what I said in the last section, don't interpret available at level 1 as bad. There are a lot of people who will flat out tell you that the Romero is the best shotgun in the game. Does that necessarily mean I agree with it? No, but I see where they're coming from. The Romero is a very, very solid choice, especially with buckshot. What are my personal preferences with shotgun? And again, look, you're gonna have to play, and you're gonna have to figure out what your personal preferences are. I'm just telling you what mine are. If I'm running buckshot, straight up regular vanilla ammo, I prefer the Romero and the Spectre over the Caldwell Rival and the Terminus. If I'm running custom ammo, that's flipped. I prefer the Rival and the Terminus over the Romero and the Spectre. Does that necessarily mean that custom ammo is bad in the Spectre, for example? No, it doesn't. Does it mean that you can't get things done with buckshot in the Rival, for example? No, it does not. This is just personal preference. That being said, there are 2 more shotguns that I haven't talked about yet. There's the Winfield Slate and the Crown and King. Let's talk about the Winfield Slate. It is the newest of the shotguns, and quite frankly, I think it's really good. It might be too good. So good that I think it might be getting nerfed at some point. Now, it's a little on the pricey side. $300 is a lot of hunt dollars to pay for a single weapon. So if you want to take something like a Winfield Slate and an uppercut, quite frankly, you're still coming out less than you would pay for just the Crown and King. Nick, why aren't you recommending the Crown and King? It's the most expensive shotgun, right? Yes, it is. I personally find the Crown and King a little bit too slot machine-ish. This is my Crown and King experience. There are times when I feel like with a Crown, I can walk into a room and I can clear an entire trio by myself. Just bang, 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 3 shots, and it almost feels criminally easy. I've also had the other side of that experience where I have unloaded the entire thing against one person, gotten hit markers, and they're still alive and well staring at me. There's a reason why some of the community calls the Crown and King the Clown and Cringe. Anyway, what might this loadout look like as you evolve it? So, when I start, it might look like a Romero and a Silenced Nagant or regular Nagant. The Pax, I feel like, is a very underrated little pistol. For $100, let me tell you, that is a workhorse of a pistol. You can get a lot done. As you upgrade it, again, I would prefer, if you stick with buckshot, I would take the Spectre or the Slate, and I would take the uppercut. Okay, so with the short and the medium range out of the way, let's talk about my, long range. I put that in quotes for a reason. So my personal play style, I tend to play very scrappy. I don't like hanging back. I don't like playing peak wars. I like to mix it up. That's my personal preference. So that's the reason why you will very rarely see me running a scope. Very rarely. So that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to get up close and in someone's face, right? Sometimes I want to play the support guy. I want to play, the guy who's playing cover for everyone who's pushing up. So what does that look like when I first prestige? Well, it might look something like this: a Springfield and a Silenced Nagant. So I've talked about the Silenced Nagant already. Again, I really feel like the Silenced Nagant is one of those pistols that can fit into just about any loadout. I really enjoy the Springfield. I will mention this as well. Mixing half bleed ammo, half regular ammo is a solid choice with the Springfield. I think is really good. Very simple formula. Are they behind cover? Use your vanilla ammo. Are they not behind cover? Use the bleed ammo. Also, if you want to increase ammo pool, you can do something like, take a PAX. And then if you want to increase the bleed ammo, put bleed ammo in the PAX. If you want to increase the regular medium ammo, just use the regular vanilla ammo. The ammo pools are shared. Keep that in mind. So if your primary and your secondary use the same type of ammo, then they are shared across the weapon. Quite frankly, this loadout has a lot of versatility. So you can take something like a Martini Henry, for example, or a Sparks, or you can take something like a Lebel, Berthier, Mosin. There are so many directions you can go. Well, Nick, give us a few. Okay, for example, a Sparks Officer or Martini Henry Officer. Why those choices? Well, the Martini or the Sparks both do a very, very high amount of initial damage. The Officer does a small amount of damage, but has a very high fire rate. So if you tag them with something that does a lot of damage right off the bat, usually you only need to give them just a quick tap and they'll fall over. The Bornheim will also do it. I'm personally not a big fan of the Bornheim, but just understand that if you're looking for pistols that have very high fire rates but do suffer a little bit on the damage end, the Officer and the Bornheim are probably where you want to look. So what about things like the Lebel? Well, okay, so I'm personally a big fan of the Lebel. It was my first long ammo rifle love. That being said, if you run that gun, I kind of feel like you're stuck running the uppercut just because of the ammo pool reserves. Because the Lebel does not have a very big reserve ammo pool. What does that mean? When you go to loot the ammo boxes, the amount of bullets you get are based upon your reserve pool. So if you're just running something like a Lebel and a silenced Nagant, you're not going to get a lot of long ammo bullets out of the ammo boxes. Why? Because there's not a very large long ammo reserve pool. But if you run something like an uppercut with the Lebel, you will get more bullets back. So I was originally going to add some gameplay to this video, but it already went kind of long, so I decided not to do that. If you are interested in seeing me run, quite frankly, some of the exact loadouts that I mentioned, look, I've got well over 30 videos in my console playlist, and I also play on PC as well. So I do have some PC highlights, for your. I do have some PC highlights if you want to see that as well. Anyway. Keep one thing in mind. If you do go back, if you're new to hunt on console and you decide to go back and watch some of those older videos, keep this in mind. We only recently got things like 60 frames a second and slightly better textures right now. The state of the game right now, the textures still are kind of squirrely. Crytek's working on it. Hopefully they get it smoothed out. But just keep that in mind if you go back into my archive and you're like, what is all this? Yeah, it used to run. I used to play on the original Xbox One, and if you're playing on that old hardware, my heart goes out to you because I felt that suffering too, and I capture that in some of the gameplay videos. But anyway, I'm going to close this video out with mentioning a few of my past favorite loadouts that I've played. As I mentioned it earlier in the video, the Veterli and the Silenced Nagant was probably my first main loadout. But here's some other ones that you can try. See if maybe these work for you. Crossbow impacts, shot bolt specifically. And I will mention this. The crossbow and the shot bolt, I think, are probably more for advanced players when you get a little bit more comfortable. I think that weapon's a little tougher to learn. It's very satisfying once you do learn it. It's a very, very good weapon. But it is, I would consider that maybe not the most beginner friendly. So other loadouts. Winfield Saber, I did that for a long time. Spectre Uppercut, I still run that one pretty often. Spectre Uppercut is solid, especially on console. Although that being said, I think the Slate might take that spot. I'm really, really liking the Slate. The only thing that the Slate has going against it is the cost. It's almost twice as expensive. I think maybe it is twice. I don't know. It's significantly more cost. Anyway, the Martini Henry Riposte and the Officer, I ran that for a while. Martini Henry is a great single-shot weapon, and you can play it pretty aggressively. It reloads pretty fast. And my most recent love, something that maybe I've been running too much, is the Winfield Centennial with a hand crossbow. Those are all super fun. So there you go. If there are other topics that you would like to see me cover, if you're new, then feel free to leave them in the comments. This video has been on my to-do list for a long time, and I finally got around to being able to finish all the writing on and get it together. And I'm glad that I did. But anyway, see y'all in the bayou. Bye, y'all.